Okay, welcome to another session of the Mid-Ulster Amateur Radio Club hosted Tuesday night lecture series. I am Dave, 2I0SJV. If this is your first time here or your first time watching us on the YouTube channel, you're more than welcome. Please feel free to like, share this amongst your friends, clubs, radio amateurs, whoever you like there. So you can catch all our previous lectures also under our Tuesday night lecture series title on YouTube. Just give it a quick search, and all our previous series there shall come up. So why are we here this evening? Well, we're joined by Murray, G6JYB, and who will give himself a wee bit of an introduction in a minute there, and John, the RSTV president, GI4BWM, and a host of others. And we're here to talk on the next stages past the Ofcom consultation. We have a few questions which were submitted previously. We're going to go through a few of those. If you do have some questions this evening that are burning and you'd love to ask, now's your opportunity. We'll get to some of them at the end, but if you want to stick them in the chat at any time, you can do. And we'll see what time we've got towards the end to answer as many of those as possible. So without any further ado, Murray, if you want to give yourself an unmute, and John, you can give yourselves a wee introduction there. And you tell me when you're ready for the first question, and we'll go right ahead.
Right, so just for the very brief intro, I'm Murray G6JYB. In this role, I'm Spectrum Chair and have had the privilege of being on a Newark talk once before. Not that local to obviously Northern Ireland, but I do realise that the audience is wider than that as well. So obviously had a bit of a role in the Ofcom consultation, whose seeds do go back, all the way back to the start of COVID. So although it was obviously peaked from last summer to the autumn, and is another phase at the moment, the licence conditions being changed, which I'm sure you all know off by heart, go back to 2006 or thereabouts. So if you've been deeply into that or been a trainer or some other things, you may be more familiar with them. Other folk may be sort of not knowing some of the finer detail. And some of that detail, and it's often the detail, is some of the important aspects of the consultation, which is finished, but there's one final phase of that, which we'll mention a bit later on. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. John, hello, welcome. I guess between yourself and Murray, you're going to be trying to answer a few questions. For those that don't know you, you want to give a wee introduction there, John?
Yeah, John, GI4BWM, RSTB president at the moment. Also in Northern Ireland, along with a lot of the other ones on the call here. Snowy in Northern Ireland as it is at the moment. I've been licensed for over 50 years and a member of RAINAD for over 50 years, for full disclosure. So I've a foot firmly in both camps. And that's about all I'm going to say. Standing by for the questions, Dave.
Excellent, excellent. And again, thank you to both you for taking the time to join us and answer a few of the questions. So we'll kick right off. One of our first questions was actually from our club chairman, who's on the call here, but I'll read it out here. So it's from William, 2I0 Whiskey Mike November, WMN. As the present chairman of the Mid-Ulster Amateur Radio Club, I have one question regarding a special event call sign for the whole of next year and the possibility of getting a call with two numbers in it. For example, GB60VFW or something similar. As next year will be the club's 60th birthday, and with the consultation, how are special call signs going to work for the year? Is it going to be possible for a shorter period, or what way will the new licensing changes affect this?
That's for Murray. Definitely for Murray.
Yes, thanks very much. And I'm glad we started with an easy and good news answer. So things like GB60 or GB100 are classically they're known as special events, specials, and certainly up to now have actually not been available formally for club anniversaries. They were very much created for major national and international events of significance and needed all sorts of third-party support. And Ofcom occasionally said, okay then, or sometimes said no. And that upset a few people. Now, special events are really an amateur thing. There's no real spectral or licensing implications per se. So when it came to this consultation, a lot of focus was on license conditions, but as we know, call sign policy in its various guises came under the scope for the very first time. And these sort of special events are ones where Ofcom had to handle them fairly manually and sort of check all these criteria. So they've gone for the huge simplification that in future, in the very near future, any of those will be, can be applied for without a problem, just as the more classic GB single digit ones. Now, the only issue is just the logistics, because at the moment their online portal, if you use it today, can get sort of standard SES call signs in about 5 minutes flat if you're lucky, by your online licensing access. Today, you'd have to email Spectrum Licensing with a filled-in PDF form. So when they, in their consultation statement, confirm what they were going to do on this, it basically says, wait for phase 2, at which point they will liberalise the call signs. However, during phase 2, whenever that is, it's not automated. You have to, the automation for online access comes in phase 3, the final phase. So please don't expect that come March the 1st or whenever the new terms formally come into effect this year, that you'll be immediately able to apply for something like that. Ofcom still have a few things to do and get their personnel sorted out, but sometime during the rest of this year, that liberalisation will occur along with whatever the guidance is. It's still a fairly manual process for the moment, but you won't be blocked from celebrating a club anniversary, and you can have almost any reasonable, decent, honest and inoffensive SES of your choice, provided it's not been, provided the numbers and letters haven't been used before for a year or so. And I believe the length of its validity is either up to a year or fractionally under a year. So come nearer the time, I think whether it's in fact one call sign or potentially 2, depending on exactly what you're trying to do, it's up to you, and off you go. So it's will be very straightforward. How amateurs handle that on QRZ and QSL handling and all that sort of stuff isn't an Ofcom concern, of course, but as long as it's clearly identifiable and all the usual things that go with the normal messaging, it does open it up for clubs. It's some of the rules are liberalised elsewhere, so you don't always have to have full public access. So, for example, during COVID, there was a waiver for that, and you could designate different locations within the club or a local town, for example. So it is much more liberalised, the special event station system. So I hope that covers, I think, most of the Q&A on that one.
Yeah, absolutely, that definitely does. So obviously, moving on to the next question there, Murray, RayNet, we have a few, and I myself am a RayNet member. We have loads of RayNet operators in with us this evening. We have a few questions, and I'm sure you can think of. I've tried to sort of lump them all together. So this question might come in a few different parts.
And John will lead, but before you get into the questions, I think it's useful to understand where we've started from, and that is And I'm sad to say there was no public information available. So if we compare how Ofcom started this, there was Ofcom went through it with a fine-tooth comb all the data that's in, say, the UK repeaters site for the public stuff there, and gradually understood that the equivalent of that information, apart from a few notes in RSGB's band plan, just isn't around, to be honest. So that wasn't as transparent for them to start with, but nonetheless, we did cover some things off. So the background to how a lot of RayNet use operates today, ironically, there are very specific RayNet-driven clauses in the current old license that people have forgotten about, or were decided that they'd got so complex that Ofcom had decided to sort of change that. So stuff around remote talk through, which is going to cover proper for individuals, sort of crossband talk through, isn't a repeater, by the way. It's I think one of the Section 10 clauses is sort of covers the so-called remote control, effectively. Mm-hmm. The other aspect, which was the grey area, was that some of the systems are obviously not for general use by other amateurs. They're much more sort of defined for RayNet groups. So that was another convenient grey area of the old license that basically the system worked under. But obviously the so-called permit system was just a way of internally registering that. It had no basis in the license conditions per se. Now, much to our, I won't say surprise, but interest, shall we say, when Ofcom decided to bring in a lot of the systems that were under NOVs to save them basically work, that all of a sudden is a bit of a catch-all in some respects, whether it's repeaters, gateways, or a few other things. They also, on our advice, deliberately split up remote control much more clearly from unattended. But of course, if you were doing repeaters or anything else, you knew that whether it was general reception or 70 SEMs like secondary band, it all triggered frequency clearance stuff to make sure you weren't interfering. And so some of those facilities are now more liberal, but different. Other things are around getting the channels sorted out, or a few other things. I shall pass over to John, whose other hat, which he hasn't mentioned yet, will provide a few of those answers for you, I think.
Okay. Basically, a lot of this has caused an awful lot of heat and light, and rightly so, because people were confused, didn't really know what was happening. And to be truthful, I don't think Ofcom were too sure either. So I've explained a lot of stuff, and Murray has explained a lot of stuff to them, and we've arranged a meeting very shortly to sort of get some more of the fine detail in this. But basically, Ofcom have said they do not wish in any way to stop RayNet doing what it does. They simply want to regularize what they're doing, so make sure things are properly covered. So there probably will be some interim arrangements where some dispensations will be given, and then in the fullness of time, RayNet will be issued with a series of call signs, probably a series, an MB something or other, series of call signs, which can then be allocated and authorized in the proper fashion. But it's well understood that there are so many systems out there that that's not going to happen overnight. So I think that's the bottom line is Ofcom have said to me positively that they're not going to stop RayNet doing what it needs to do. They just want to regularize the situation. So fear not, you're not all going to be switched off overnight or anything like that. And hopefully we'll have that ironed out very shortly. Now, we did request, in fact, there was almost the other way about. Ofcom requested a meeting with ourselves, that is ETCC on the RSGB side, and RayNet. They requested it and then they went away and didn't come back to us. So I chased that up recently, and we're having a meeting with them very shortly. So things are progressing. Do you want to add anything to that, Murray?
And there's more than one way of solving it. And one of the newer, so I mentioned pre-cleared channels. Obviously, some of that will reflect existing usage, but we have to be prepared to change to accommodate primary users who are very conservative, as people have noticed with the coordination notice. But the one of the newer aspects, remote control has been massively liberalised if it's personal stuff. There may have been a lack of understanding that if things like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, internet, those don't count. They're license exempt. It's only about amateur frequencies and usage doing that. And then the other thing which we had lobbied for and welcomed was, unlike the previous license, club licenses can hold repeaters. Now, whether they're the 5-watt systems or the 25-watt systems, is up to you. But that also means that with RAINET groups often having their own club calls, there's the option of using that generic call as well as individual calls for whether it's, as I say, remote control or a slightly more generic. RAINET does, in a few cases, do have fixed repeaters as well as, their more mobile ad hoc systems. So there's a number of ways of solving it. It's a pity some groups got almost over concerned and it wasn't perhaps as coherent coming into Ofcom, but nonetheless, there should be no issue in the end. Away from sort of secondary bands, the picture is obviously rather rosier, where there's pure restrictions there as well. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, all I mentioned was hotspots, and I know there's one of the questions on the in the email was about hotspots. Hotspots up until now, of course, were for personal use only. And if you wanted to broadcast third-party traffic, you did need an NOV, even though they're only 50 milliwatts or whatever. But that was a bit of and strictly speaking, they were actually slightly illegal as well. Same as, Murray, what other were they? Whisper and all those sort of things, Ross. Strictly speaking,
so a number of unattended ops were sort of very grey area in the license. But they, as you mentioned, if you take a DV Mega, for example, it's, I know, about 10 milliwatts. So even with a decent antenna, you'd still be under the 5-watt ERP sort of rule and the new license. But unfortunately, if it's unattended in 70 SEMS at the moment, it's slightly debatable under the coordination notice. Now, because all our hotspots, we only need 2 frequencies in 70 SEMS, one of which is already in a shared piece of the band where ISM have already got more than that power limit, actually. So I'm sure very quickly we will assemble the appropriate data. We already obviously know all the standard repeater data at sort of liberalising those channels. We're very keen to get gateways to be unattended in 70 SEMS. Today, even though people get call signs, they've had to be attended despite the low power. And we've obviously had that conversation with Ofcom, but they are in the hands of the primary user. But I think a lot of the way through some of that stuff is so-called pre-cleared channels.
And they're very, very current talks with MOD with on 70 SEMS. As we speak, almost.
Either.
I know, but as far as we're concerned, the main in this talk, the main issue is 70 SEMS.
Yeah, it's we got 10. Well, in theory, we got 10 megahertz to play with. So there's way more capacity. I know we got quite a lot of systems in there, but there's far more capacity in 70 SEMS, and we need to access that capacity compared to 2 meters simply does not have the capacity, or sometimes some of the hotspot kit doesn't go down to the lower frequencies either.
Yeah.
So just touching as well on attended versus unattended and 70 SEMS here, you'll have seen the questions there from some of our RAINET operators there. People are concerned about the loss of talk through, to withdraw this facility would severely restrict what RAINET can do on the day-to-day compromise.
They're not withdrawing it, Dave. That's what I've told you. They're not withdrawing it.
Yes,
certainly not.
That's what I'm saying there. Obviously, the thing to take away from this is it is not going to be withdrawn, because sort of the next 3 questions were all
and it depends which way you're talking through. So if your output's unattended on 70, yes, there is a little bit of an issue at the moment. If you're coming in on 70 and coming out somewhere in 2 meters or one of the other bands, you're receiving 70. You're personally attending your own transmitter. carry on.
But most of them go both ways, of course. Most of them go both ways. Yeah.
But being in attendance, is the guarantee against the worry about interference. And then the other thing is to be clearly identifiable, and that's why John briefly mentioned moving to a clearer call, or perhaps a dedicated call sign series. That and there's plenty of options for that.
Yeah. And they've also said, well, we'll have to discuss the fine details, but they're not really worried about the call signs are, as long as we know what they are, and they are duly authorized and recorded. So we can use whatever call sign series is available, really.
Excellent. Okay, so moving on then, we have 3 questions from one operator there, but we'll take them in 3 different parts. So Ian, GI4BWM asks, on the proposed changes to the suffix uses, I'm understanding that any suffix may be created. Can you expand on the proposed use and advice on a sensible use of the particular operating conditions and so on that are going to, or the call signs and that sort of thing?
That's a very good question.
Strangely enough, this piece of liberalisation got some people quite concerned. Because they were concerned that someone would put slash and some hugely long sort of ridiculous suffix on the end. To be honest, today the suffixes, as you know, are already optional. It's just that let's see, 4 were predefined, and what Ofcom are doing here is just nominally getting rid of those predefined ones and leaving you total freedom. The only 2 conditions on that is, whatever you do, the principle of staying clearly identifiable applies, and therefore you do have to be a bit careful with 1 or 2 combinations that can sound like a foreign country.
Yeah, you couldn't use a slash. Yeah, you couldn't use a slash with another foreign suffix. Yeah, it'd be
So, and then the other one is you can't use anything offensive because it breaches the content of transmissions regulations. I think it's called. But other than that, today amateurs frequently quote /portable, even though the definition at the time, currently is not portable. Funny enough, /handheld, /QRP.
Static mobile is my favorite.
Yes. And of course, at low power, we will have /aero possibilities as well, where things like, so suffixes, if you're running, say, data systems or strange sort of aircraft or what have you, they do give you, as you are, individual amateurs maybe down on a single call sign in due course, which wasn't mentioned. The suffixes give you options for data stations where you might be, as people used to be, /L for a link, or /70 because your output's on 70. So in fact, some of the beacons used to have a common call sign but a different suffix, for example, to distinguish it on the different bands. So it's incredibly flexible, but I'm sure common sense will apply. And if you use a very long one, I think your contest and QSO rate will go down. But it's one of those bit like special event ones. It's sort of sensible liberalisation, really.
Bottom line is there's no real guidance other than it should be sensible.
Yes, sensible and non-offensive.
Non-offensive, yeah.
Which sometimes need defined guidelines on what is sensible and what is not.
Well, the second one is legally defined, so you have to go off to that particular legal instrument.
So I see Philip has raised his hand there. I'm taking it, Philip, you have a wee comment or a question there just on this issue. If you want to go ahead there.
You do, and I've raised it before in some Spectrum Forum meetings and whatnot. So the suffix can be particularly anything you want it to be. And Marie, you'll remember that my big thing was you should be identifiable at all times. That's important. But it's a bit about offensive. What I find offensive, Dave may not, and what Dave finds offensive, I may not. So who defines what is offensive and what is not offensive?
probably a matter for the courts in the end.
Yes, ultimately
well
that's right.
Yeah.
It's so the enabling legislation, which is in your current license, so it's no different to the current license, is a thing called Content of Transmissions Act. That in practice comes down to what the courts and previous precedents have defined as offensive. So if you compared to very old licenses, you weren't allowed to play a little tune, or it was very strict, wasn't it? No, that's not an issue under the Content of Transmissions Act. So the legal thing is no different to what's offensive on a TV program or radio broadcast or some other thing. It's the same. I think it's essentially the same legal threshold.
Yeah, but what we don't find offensive in Northern Ireland, people in the south of England, around the Oxford area and whatnot, I'm not pointing no fingers, might find offensive.
Well, it's whatever your local courts and judiciary then. I'm not saying it's perfectly consistent around the country.
No, very good, very good. Well, I hope that clarifies the use of suffixes and everything else anyway, just a little bit more. Keep it sensible and non-offensive. That's always a good way to start there. So moving on, the next question obviously is still around call signs, and it's from Ian, still there. It relates to the change to intermediate call sign structure. Can you, Murray or John, outline the time span on the change from the, I'm going to say the 2i0, because I am one there, to the new M8 or M9 calls? There is family members of Ian's who are interested in these changes because they hold intermediate licenses as well.
So we've had we've had a preliminary conversation with Ofcom. Because it turned out that, the initial thing about M8 and M9 was definitely came from Ofcom. It was partly prompted by us pointing out that the existing 2 series was going to run out in a year or two, and we didn't want to go to things like 2i2 or other odd permutations. So although it's a bit novel, it seems to have been quite an attractive proposal. It comes down to workload and logistics. So in the not too distant future, the first use and probably the priority use of these will be for new exam passes, because they have to graft it into their existing IT. It won't be ready on day one. We haven't been given a sort of firm start date, but I'm sure or whether it's ourselves or headquarters will keep up to date on what's going on there. And we then pointed out to Ofcom that could they handle 1,000 2 series licensees on day one, all ringing Spectrum licensing, saying, can I have my new shiny M8? And there's no need to rush it. So when they do fix this, as you may know, I think the 3-letter combinations that are in issue today under the 2 series are effectively reserved. It'll be initially quite manual, and eventually, obviously, when they do change their platform in a year's time, it might be a bit easier. But we don't have a definitive answer. I know there's quite a few intermediate folk interested in this, but sorry, I can't be more definite.
Absolutely. So it's a work in progress, and when they get to it, they'll get to it. Basically, is that that's really how it's going to go? Yeah.
The one thing I will say is, our unofficial advice is don't leave it for years to come, because the new platform cannot cope with 2 series call signs.
Oh, okay. That's that.
They'll be able to keep their legacy IT running for a little while, but sooner or later, the reason they've come up with that is it makes, sadly, easier IT.
Sorry, can I just ask a quick one on that, Maura? You said their new system will not handle the 2 series. So can we take from that the 2 series will be filtered out? So I have a 2 series at the minute, say, and I don't want to change to an M8 or M9. Does that mean 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, you're going to have
some undefined? Well, actually, in your case,
well, I'm on full call.
It'll go to single call, so you won't have that problem because you'll be losing
So,
it.
but I'm saying,
But
for example,
for intermediates, now for intermediates who are attached to the 2 series, it'll stay around for however long they can support the older platform. But there isn't any cut-off date. But if it got to the point where 90% plus had already moved over and it was only at X hundred or what have you left, then clearly Ofcom would need to consider, has the time come, and they'd have to notify and do the final variation on that, to be fair.
but further down the line, maybe a few years, it looks like that will be the case.
There was a not so subtle hint in the consultation document, actually more or less said that. Said, we don't have any plans to do away with them at the present, or some words to that effect. But that means,
that's the point I'm getting to.
Yeah, I think they're going to disappear. Definitely do. Yeah.
So it's all about logistics and support times, and clearly we don't want anyone left behind. So we're certainly not keen to push too hard to change over early, because I say that it'll just cause a logjam. But once that initial surge has gone down, we might gently prod people who may cease to have been active, for example, but might not want to lose a call sign.
But at least the 3 letters will be reserved until that changeover point. So anyone with the 2I0 XYZ will get M8 or M9, whatever it is, XYZ.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we touched a wee bit on the hotspots there. I don't know if you want to mention it again there. The change to the award of NOVs to low power digital hotspots, which I understand may be open for other amateurs to use and can have call signs allocated to them. Can there be any clarity around the situation regarding this change and the spectrum allocation for the devices and other low power repeaters going forward?
That's definitely a spectrum one. That's for you, Murray. A spectrum one.
Right. Well, I'll take the call sign aspect first. So if you take the current proposals, we only get asked to do call sign issuing when you're over 5 watts ERP. So technically, if you didn't do anything else, under the new rules, if you get past the spectrum bit, then they'd revert to just your own call sign. And in fact, if you look at some Echo Link systems and other things, that's what individuals would do. You'd be, I know, M7ABC-L or whatever. It wouldn't be an MB6 or MB7 type call sign. Now clearly, not so much the hotspots, because there's only a small number open, but gateways, we've got hundreds, all with the appropriate MB calls. And I'm sure some people will be reluctant to see those call signs go. So as John mentioned, existing usage will try and grandfather in 3 clear if we're in lucky. Well, hotspots are so low power, I'm sure there's not going to be a lot of change on the channeling there. Whether or not we add an extra choice or not, I don't know. There's 2 frequencies at the moment.
Yeah.
But around gateways and other 5 watt systems, I think there's an interesting thing, and if we see demand for either continuity or for other reasons, then I think John will have to add that to his discussion with Ofcom.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would like to probably preserve their existing gateway call signs, and again, I don't think Ofcom will be terribly worried about that, as long as it's back to fully identifiable at all times. That's the proviso in all cases. So I'm sure we'll have discussions, but I don't think they don't really want to take call signs away. It's not really there. It's not It's nothing to do with spectrum as far as they're concerned, as long as the station is identifiable. So I'm sure we can negotiate around that one.
Yeah, what it might do is usefully, at the moment you obviously have to go through ETCC for all those, and if you operate under your own call sign at low PAS, technically speaking, there's no formal requirement in the new license fee. But if you're after call signs, that will help in many respects. That registration process will help keep the database and coordination in quite a good state. So there's informally, it's not such a bad idea.
And it also says, even for the less than 5 watts ERP, you must avoid harmful interference. and ETCC are working on a system of self-coordination where you can go into the website and actually look and see what's there, and make sure that there's no clashes. You would actually, if you do cause interference, Ofcom have the right to ask you, prove where you check that there will be no harmful interference. Give them the evidence. You're thinking about everyone's interest actually to do this, because you can be asked, and may well be asked if you do cause problems.
Okay, so a question from myself there, Murray and John. Obviously, around the practicalities of the consultation, and then the amateur community was asked for feedback. Was there actually anything that, from those feedback and those responses, that Ofcom looked at and thought, you know something, maybe we've missed the mark here, we'll maybe not go as far as that or change that? Or was it a case of, yeah, your feedback's accepted, but we're still going to change this or change
Well,
that? Or
I can answer that. There were some changes. And am I able to share a slide on your screen?
Absolutely.
So you may be aware that last week RSGB released a video where I was chatting about an update, and it just so happened that some things didn't change, and which disappointed people, but some things did. So hopefully you can see that.
Yep.
So call signs, clearly were the controversial area. Well, one very controversial area, was sort of silent key call signs, and other people wanting to recycle call signs potentially very quickly within 2 years. Don't think was at all popular. They wouldn't go back to one call sign forever and never being reissued, because we'd run out ultimately. But they certainly took both our and a number of other people's inputs, that if you aligned it to the classic well-established 5-year validation period, that should be enough gap to give you some clarity versus old entries on QRZ or all those other very amateur issues that Ofcom aren't bothered about. But it also probably will ease their database changes as well. So that was one common sense thing. And in fact, even that doesn't formally start to happen until they get to the so-called phase 3, which is in a year's time. Some people will know that, particularly mobile equipment, and this actually was sort of related to some RayNet interests as well. Foundation was going to be raised from 10 to 20 watts, but a lot of mobile kit is actually 25. So because it was only a fraction of a dB, no one was bothered. So that was revised up, in a fairly common sense manner to align with particularly VHF, UHF equipment, I think it's fair to say. Elsewhere, today, if your foundation, apart from a not so popular 10 gigahertz 1 watt access, which was the old education facility in the old license, but hasn't caught on as well, we'd asked to help recruit newer amateurs, to give them low power access in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands, so that if you were playing with Bluetooth and wireless LANs and all those sort of wonderful modern chipsets in maker spaces and what have you, you were fine. But as soon as you put a really decent antenna on, that was illegal. So by doing what we've done there, Ofcom initially proposed 1 watt, and then our satellite colleagues pointed out that if you just have a little bit more, you can actually get up to geostationary orbit on Oscar 100, QA 100 with 2 watts at 2.4 gigs, admittedly with a decent antenna. And we thought, well, that really would be attractive. So they accepted that modest change. And that is power going into an antenna. So if you're deploying mesh networks or very temporary data links, and you've got a watt or 2 into a decent dish, that's how Hamnet and other things have caught on in Europe, but not in the UK so far. And that brings us on to data systems. So repeaters, gateways, and beacons were in the original consultation, but there were X100 NOVs associated with whether it was packet radio, which sounds a bit legacy, but is still about, or APRS, which is AX25, and gradually emerging things like LoRa and other mesh networks, again often in 77, sometimes higher up. And this is where we were playing Ofcom at their own game, and we said, well, do you really want X100 NOVs left to process every so often? And they clearly thought that by effectively using adding a similar facility into the license as the repeater and gateway clauses, that would make that one more liberalised. The thing that may have surprised some people, but it had been on the cards for a while, was Schedule 2, which is where the unattended restrictions and the APRS restrictions and the ARDF restrictions were lurking, had been very neglected and outdated, and also didn't mention all frequency clearing stuff for all the other systems that weren't beacons either. So that's where they've moved to this new coordination notice. What you see today is only the first draft. It's not perfect. It causes a few inconsistencies and concerns. But nonetheless, the interesting intention of this is that whilst the new main license conditions, once they're finished off and issued, will stay fairly static until some major consultation, by referencing an external document, it does make it more flexible to get updates into that if something else crops up over time. So that can work both ways. We see sort of Ministry of Defence usage changing in 23 SEMS, for example, but it would also mean that we could get extra leeways or waivers put into the 70 SEMS usage, because today they've drafted it in a way where it applies to any power level whatsoever. There's no 5 watt, and we don't care threshold, which is what I'm sure a lot of us would want there. And there were a number of other sort of minor drafting errors, and there are still some errors. So you've still got till a week's time to put in your reply around some of those sort of smaller stuff, or the fact that 5 megahertz is 5 kilohertz at the moment. So it's that the sort of current notice period isn't rerunning the entire consultation, I think it's fair to say. But if there's sort of some of that fine detail that we've been talking about, or other things where it won't be the license, it'll be the guidance that's not being done, where we might want to provide some inputs as well, then yes, so they did listen. There's one very well-known area where they weren't listening as much, and I won't mention that, but perhaps John will.
No, it's not a good. This isn't a good forum for that particular one.
No, I thought not. Anyway, I'll stop that screen share, but that is expanded on in our separate video, and in the not too distant future, these slides will be on the website as well, along with where we're heading with on band plans. That is clearly there's consequences that flow from their changes, but we're still working on some of those, as John said.
Okay, great. So I see Philip's raised his hand. We've come to the end of a set questions. We have about maybe 10 minutes there of if anyone has any off the cuff questions to put you under pressure from the floor. I'll let Philip go then, and if anyone in the call has another question that maybe hasn't been touched on, or they thought of something, if you want to raise your hand, if we're trying wave on screen, grab someone's attention there, we'll take you one person at a time there. So don't just unmute. If you try and raise your hand, if you know how to do that for Zoom, or get someone's attention, or put it in the chat below, and I'll read it out to you. If you don't want to appear on the screen, that's totally fine. So if you want to, you can do that now. Philip, you had your hand raised there. If you want to go ahead, and we'll see.
I just want Murray to clarify something there. It's great, and it's a welcome that foundation licenses and whatnot are going to get access to 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And I know you made reference to our satellite colleagues and friends. Now, also on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, we can, or we are at the minute presently here playing with a data network. You said it's very popular in Europe, but there's there's a few areas in the UK. Now, the access to 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, that is attended. If one wanted to set up a 5 gigahertz or 5 meg, no, I'm thinking wrong, it's 2.4 and 5, 5 link between two spots, you would still have to apply for an NOV under the new license, wouldn't you?
You'd have to, we shouldn't call them NOVs, you should call them sort of clearance certificates or call signs or whatever. Technically, our role is to provide a call sign once something's gone through coordination or what have you, because both of them are secondary bands. But if you are either attending or under 5 watts ERP, certainly for the foundation one that you might be, then there's no need for that sort of call sign process. It's only when you're up at the, above the 5 watts in the 5 to 25 watts ERP. But that bit like, it's exactly the same as the repeater process.
Right. Okay. I must have a discussion with you sometime about that.
Yeah.
We want to start putting up a couple of test links for data.
Yeah.
So,
When you look in Europe, because 2.4 gigs is quite busy with domestic stuff, you tend to find a lot of the longer range backbone stuff is done in 5 gigs. A, because it's slightly quieter, and B, you can get more directional antennas into it.
yeah. Yeah. Well, right. That's another discussion for another day. Thank you.
One thing sort of quite different I ought to add whilst we're waiting for a few other bits of Q&A is we've obviously mentioned, call sign changes and various other things. For some people, it would be extremely advisable to make sure you've got a current login and validation on their current IT system before any transfers or other changes occur, because you wouldn't want to be lost in the process, or when it comes to eventually later on where your lower call, probably your lower call signs or duplicate call signs come into the scope of their changes, for them to knock out the wrong one.
I would hope everybody by now has got a login, or they should have validated by now. But if they haven't, and Steve can correct me on this, I think we on the RSDB website there is a leaflet or information on how to log in and validate, isn't there? I just can't remember where it is, but I do recall it say.
Should be. Anyone have any questions there from the floor there? Now's your chance to raise your hand or ask a question there. Don't all rush at once.
Don't all.
I have a quick question, but it's not to Murray. I see Greg and Kathy and whatnot's on the call, and I'm not trying to put you in the spot, but I do believe Raynet are going to issue some guidance or some information soon. Do we know when that is?
Might need to unmute. Can't hear anyone.
Greg is unmuted, but I don't hear nothing.
I'm unmuted. I was waiting for Chair's permission to speak. Directed net.
No, go ahead, of course, Greg. Go ahead.
Thank you. Understand that should be going out tonight.
Excellent, because I have been logging on all day on my email and I haven't seen anything. So for those who are on this call, maybe Raynet related, there will be so you're saying the guidance should be out tonight, Craig?
Correct. As Murray and John have alluded to, this has been such a rapidly changing situation since the Spectrum Forum meeting last Saturday.
Yep.
That it's been revised to reflect the great progress that's been made in getting a meeting with Ofcom on Friday. And thanks to John for facilitating that.
Yeah, glad to be able to do that. They were actually, when we chatted and just told them the seriousness of the situation, not so much that it was serious, but there was so much disquiet about what was going to happen. They were very glad to actually try and clarify. So let's hope that's sorted out, Grant. Yep.
Yeah, that was just to raise that for those. I'm aware there's a few on the call who have never been on any of these calls before, and it was probably because of the announcement in the Raynet News last week. So hopefully that clarifies things for them.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, just to remind people of the timeline, if you're making a formal representation to Ofcom, the notice period closes at 5 o'clock on Monday, the 22nd of January. So just inside a week to go. That then leaves them a couple of weeks before, in principle, tidying up small stuff as opposed to sort of slightly longer term things, and running their so-called variation process for individual licenses during February. So whether or not they're pre-dated or post-dated, so they all start at exactly the same point at the end of February or not, I don't know. I'm sure they'll work that out. Otherwise, you'll end up with a slight overlap in conditions, won't you?
Yeah, they're having quite a job, I think, keeping to their own dates. So we shall see.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been an awful lot for them to do, so they do have some excuse. But I suppose they brought it on themselves by having a consultation, and now they have to deal with it. But there was a tremendous bit of processing going on actually to look and analyze all the stuff that did come back. I mean, they had 1,500 odd responses to look at. So, and you can see them all if you look. Well, the most of them are on their website.
Great, great. Okay, any other final questions there from the floor before I'll pass it back to Murray and John for any final closing comments or anything? But anyone else have any questions you want to ask there? Going once, going twice. Okay, Murray and John, listen, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. We had some great questions there. Thanks for doing the research and everything and answering them, because we passed them to you before. Just so I really do appreciate you taking the time there. Anything else you want to finish off with there, just before we close?
Well, I would close by saying that this is a once in a lifetime change to our license, as we all know, and I think it's going to give us a lot more freedom. But we have to be careful. You obviously don't get something for nothing. Well, I think it will be okay. There will be a lot of things to iron out, and a lot of fine details still to go through. But Ofcom are actually very willing at the moment to work with us on this, so it's just good to hear. They are quite amenable, and I think things will work out in the end, as long as we keep things steady. That's about all I have to say. Thank you for actually being on the call, and I hope it's answered and not quite put to bed, but put your mind slightly at rest anyway, which is what I wanted to do tonight. Murray, over to you.
Yeah, so we've basically completed the first step on the road. We're obviously in this sort of notice period, but although we've still got work in hand, you have to remember that this is also opening up a huge number of opportunities, around supervision to bring new people into the hobby, liberalising special events, as we've mentioned.
Opportunities, yeah.
I'm sure some contest stations will appreciate their kilowatt as well on primary bands. So and foundation construction. I would hope we've tried to remove a number of obstacles that sort of sometimes too frequently triggered an almost impossible NOV for John to sort out. And I hope that in the end, the simplification, it will work. No, we didn't ask for all the things in this, but I think an awful lot of them are very positive. And perhaps in a year's time, or whenever you have the next sort of invite for us, we can look back and see how well we've done.
Hopefully it will be to the good of amateur radio in general, and allow us, as you say, Murray, to open up demonstration stations, allow people to use radio rather than having other people to fully supervise and all the rest. So I think great opportunity, especially in schools, that sort of thing, to actually get in there and actually let young people use radios, etc., and get them enthused, get them in there, get them hooked. They'll come back to us if they don't come back to us immediately.
Murray, I would just say there, you mentioned invite. You don't always have to be invited to these calls. If you see one being advertised, anybody is welcome to join any of the discussions that the Mid-Ulster Amateur Radio Club Tuesday Night Lecture Series has. I do note, and I see he's still on the call, Dave,
yeah.
Steve Thomas, M1ACB, the general manager of the RSGB, is there. I don't know if Steve wants to say anything, or going forward with these changes and the simplification of the license, rather, and I do know this from my time as a regional rep and whatnot, rather than inundate Steve and headquarters with phone calls and emails, what would your advice be to people for their first
Port of call.
contact? Steve, what would your advice be for that?
Yeah, evening, Philip, and everybody again. I was keeping a low profile because I was just a visitor tonight, just dropping in. But good to see everybody again. I think the last time I was on was probably COVID times. I think I joined you for some, didn't I? Maybe once or twice since. Anyway, good to see you all. Yeah, you know the answer there, really, Philip, is to contact the regional team
everybody
first.
else's, for everybody else's benefit.
Yeah, contact the regional team first is a really good option. The RSGB sort of splits the UK into 13 different regions, and I see over your shoulder you've got the Region 8 background on, so Northern Ireland Region 8, but there's 13 of them, and then within those 13 regions there's a much higher number of districts. They often equate almost to county level, but not exactly really. It depends how each region split up, but that means you've always got somebody local to you that understands your local situation, knows about the clubs near you, all sorts of local support, and so contacting your district or your regional rep. All of the details are on the web, rsgb.org/regions will get you to it. So look for your regional rep, contact them first if you want to, but we take calls at HQ as well, you know that. But the regional team can often help you with a local view. That often helps, doesn't it?
Yep, those Steve. Yep. So the first point of contact would always be your district or regional reps, rather than inundate. I do know how inundated Steve and the team and headquarters can get at times, but or check the website. Navigate the website. You'll probably find the answer there if you navigate it properly.
Absolutely. So, Steve, that was Philip's idea to put you on the spot there, so you can get him back at some point.
You
Well,
do
listen,
not surprise me.
Thank you very much for everyone for joining us on the call, especially John and Murray. Thanks for taking the time there. I hope you have enjoyed it. It's answered some questions for you. And as I said earlier, you can pick up some of our previous lectures on our YouTube channel. If you just search for MERC or Tuesday Night Lecture Series, they'll come up under there. So we hope you've enjoyed, and everyone, hope you have learned something. Feel free, pass it on to your club, pass it on to this call, pass it on to other club members or fellow amateurs, and it should be on our YouTube channel this evening or tomorrow morning. So until the next time, which we have Kathy from Rained for our next series next month there, and we'll look forward to that too. So all the best from the Tuesday Night Lecture Series team, and we'll look forward to seeing you all.
Thank you, Dave. Good night, all.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Dave.
Thanks.